The microphone slipped from Steve Harvey's hand. Not dropped, slipped. Like his fingers had forgotten their job. The blue answer cards he always held with such confidence dangled at his side, suddenly irrelevant. The studio, which moments before had been filled with the familiar rhythm of laughter and applause, went silent. Not the kind of silence you get when someone misses a joke. The kind you get when something sacred enters the room. A 74-year-old grandmother stood at the contestant podium, her hands clasped together, her eyes clear and steady behind wire-rimmed glasses. She had just given an answer. A simple answer to a simple question. But Steve Harvey, who had hosted over 2,000 episodes of Family Feud, who had heard tens of thousands of responses, who prided himself on having a comeback for everything, stood frozen. For the first time in Family Feud history, Steve Harvey put down his microphone and walked, slowly and silently, toward a contestant. The entire studio held its breath. If you want to understand why this moment became one of the most powerful in game show history, subscribe now. Because what happens next will change how you see not just Steve Harvey, but what it means to truly listen to another human being. 30 minutes earlier, the Johnson family had walked onto the Family Feud stage like any other family. 5 generations represented: Marcus, the eldest son and team captain in his early 40s, his sister Keisha, his teenage niece, his younger brother, and standing at the end of the podium, the family matriarch, Grandma Dorothy Johnson. Dorothy was the kind of woman who wore her Sunday best on a Tuesday. Floral dress pressed crisp, pearl necklace that had belonged to her own mother, sensible shoes that had walked her through 74 years of life. Her silver hair was styled in soft curls, and when she smiled during the family introduction, you could see the lifetime of church potlucks and family reunions in that smile. "And who do we have here at the end?" Steve asked, doing his signature walk down the line, his energy filling the stage as it always did. "This is our grandmother, Grandma Dorothy," Marcus said, his voice carrying obvious pride. "Grandma Dorothy!" Steve's face lit up the way it always did when he met the older contestants. "How old are you, Grandma Dorothy?" 74, and still cooking Sunday dinner every week," she said, her voice strong and clear. The audience applauded. 74 and still cooking! Now that's what I'm talking about. Steve worked the moment, but something in his expression shifted for just a second. Those who knew Steve well, who had watched him for years, might have caught it, a flicker of something deeper than his performer's mask. "What do you cook, Grandma?" "Whatever my family needs," Dorothy said simply. "But lately, I've been cooking for one less." The audience grew quieter. Steve's smile softened. "I'm sorry to hear that, Grandma." "Don't be sorry, baby. He's in a better place. Been gone 6 months now. My husband of 52 years. Her voice didn't waver. "But we're here today because he always said this family knows how to have fun together. So here we are." Steve nodded slowly, and for a moment, the hostess appeared and just a man stood there, recognizing another person's grief. "Well, Grandma Dorothy, he's watching today. I can promise you that." "Oh, I know he is," she said with quiet certainty. "I talk to him every day." Behind the cameras, the producers shifted uncomfortably. This was getting too heavy for a game show. They signaled to Steve to move on. But Steve Harvey had already made a decision they didn't know about yet. The game began the way all Family Feud games begin. Lights, buzzers, the familiar ping of right answers appearing on the board. The Johnsons were playing against the Martinez family, a loud, enthusiastic group from Texas who brought their own energy to the stage. Round 1 went to the Johnsons. Round 2 to the Martinez family. The score stayed close, the audience engaged, Steve doing his job the way he'd done it thousands of times, improvising jokes, reacting with his legendary facial expressions, keeping the energy high. But every time the camera cut to Grandma Dorothy, she stood with her hands folded, watching her family with a serene expression that seemed to exist in a different frequency from the chaos of the game show around her. She hadn't answered a question yet. She was last in line, and the questions hadn't reached her. Until Fast Money. The Johnsons had won the main game. Now Marcus and Grandma Dorothy would play Fast Money, the final round where two family members answer 5 questions separately, trying to reach 200 points combined to win the cash prize. Marcus went first, giving solid answers. He scored 142 points. Respectable. It meant Grandma Dorothy needed 58 points. Very doable. Steve walked over to where Dorothy waited off stage, away from the board so she couldn't hear Marcus's answers. You ready, Grandma Dorothy? Ready as I'll ever be, sweetheart. They walked to the podium together. Steve explained the rules, though Dorothy had watched the show for years and knew them by heart. The clock would start, he'd ask 5 questions, she'd answer as fast as she could. 200 points total would win $20,000 for the family. Here we go, Grandma Dorothy. 20 seconds on the clock. Name something people do before they go to bed. Pray, she said instantly. Good answer. Steve moved on. Name a reason you might sleep in separate bedrooms from your spouse. Snoring, Dorothy said without hesitation. The audience laughed. Name something you might forget to do before leaving the house. Lock the door. Name a place people go to think. Church. And then came the 5th question. The question that would stop everything. Steve looked at his card. It was a standard Fast Money question, the kind they'd asked hundreds of times in hundreds of episodes. Simple. Straightforward. Designed to be answered in 1 or 2 words under time pressure. Name someone you talk to when you're alone. Dorothy's answer came without pause, without calculation, with the same quiet certainty she'd carried with her all day. My husband. I talk to him in my prayers. The words hung in the air. Steve's hand, which had been moving to click to the next question, stopped. His trademark smile, the one that had been his armor for decades of television, slowly faded. His eyes, which usually sparkled with the next joke or the next reaction, went still. The audience, which had been ready to applaud any answer, went silent. Somewhere in the control room, a director whispered into a headset, "Why isn't he moving on?" But Steve Harvey wasn't moving on. He put down his microphone, let the blue card slip from his other hand, and began walking toward Grandma Dorothy. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. The cameras kept rolling. They had to. This was live television. But every person in that studio, the camera operators, the producers, the audience members in their seats, the Martinez family still standing at their podium, everyone understood they were no longer watching Family Feud. They were witnessing something else entirely. Steve Harvey stopped in front of Grandma Dorothy. She stood barely 5 feet tall, looking up at him, her hands still clasped in front of her, her expression peaceful. Say that again, Grandma, Steve said softly. Say that again so everyone can hear it. I talk to him in my prayers, Dorothy repeated. Every morning when I wake up, I tell him about my day. Every night before I sleep, I thank him for the years we had. And I know he hears me. Steve's jaw tightened. His eyes grew bright. For a man who made his living reading people, reacting to people, he suddenly seemed to have no script for this moment. How long were you married, Grandma Dorothy? 52 years. Met him when I was 19. Married him at 22. Loved him every day since. And you lost him 6 months ago. I didn't lose him, baby. I know exactly where he is. Her voice was gentle, correcting him the way a grandmother corrects a child who's got the story slightly wrong. He's at peace. No more pain. No more struggle. He's exactly where he's supposed to be. And until I get there myself, I talk to him in my prayers. A sound began to ripple through the studio audience. Not applause. Something quieter. The sound of people crying. Steve Harvey looked down for a moment, collecting himself. When he looked back up, his voice was thick. You know what, Grandma Dorothy? I'm supposed to finish these questions. I'm supposed to tally your score and see if you and your family won the money. But right now, I don't care about any of that. He turned to the audience, then to the cameras. We're going to take a moment right here. Because sometimes something happens on this stage that's bigger than a game show. And this, he gestured to Grandma Dorothy. This is one of those times. In the control room, producers made frantic calculations. They were burning through commercial time. They were completely off script. This segment was supposed to last 3 minutes, and they were already at 5 with no end in sight. But no one called for a cut. No one stopped the cameras. Because everyone understood, this was why television exists. Not for the games or the prizes or the laughter, though those have their place. But for these moments when something true breaks through all the production and all the performance, and you see straight into the human heart. Steve turned back to Dorothy. I lost my father, he said quietly. And there are days I still pick up the phone to call him before I remember he's gone. There are days I see something funny and think, I've got to tell him about this. And then I remember I can't. Not the way I used to. Dorothy reached out and took Steve's hand. This 74-year-old grandmother, standing on a game show stage in front of millions of viewers, held the hand of one of the most famous television hosts in America, and spoke to him like they were the only two people in the room. But you do tell him, don't you, baby? In your own way. In your prayers. In your heart. You tell him, and he hears you. That's what love does. It doesn't stop when someone passes. It changes form, but it doesn't stop. The studio audience rose to their feet. Not in applause, not yet. They stood because they couldn't sit anymore. Because something too big for sitting was happening. Steve Harvey, who had made a career out of never being at a loss for words, stood silent. Tears tracked down his face, cutting through the professional makeup, making him look suddenly younger and older at the same time. Thank you, Grandma Dorothy, he finally managed. Thank you for reminding us what matters. He picked up his microphone and turned to the producers in the booth. We're going to finish this the right way, he said. We're going to tally Grandma Dorothy's score. We're going to see if this family wins. And then we're going to take our time because this moment deserves it. The numbers came up on the board. Pray had scored 47 points, the number one answer. Snoring got 21 points. Lock the door got 18. Church got 12. And my husband, I talked to him in my prayers. Even though it wasn't technically the survey answer they were looking for, Steve looked at the producers and said firmly, I don't care what the survey says. That answer gets full points. The board showed 58 points. Combined with Marcus's 142, the Johnson family had exactly 200 points. They had won. The Martinez family, who should have been disappointed, crossed the stage to embrace the Johnsons. The audience was on their feet now, applauding, crying, experiencing something they hadn't expected when they came to watch a game show taping that afternoon. But Steve Harvey wasn't done. He held up his hand for quiet. The audience settled. Grandma Dorothy, come here. I want to give you something. Dorothy walked over, and Steve Harvey did something he'd never done in over 2,000 episodes. He took off his suit jacket. His signature, perfectly tailored suit jacket that was part of his brand, part of his image, and he draped it around Grandma Dorothy's shoulders. This is for you, he said. Because you taught everyone here today, everyone watching at home, something I hope they never forget. Love doesn't end. It transforms. And the people we've loved and lost, they're not gone as long as we keep talking to them. In our prayers. In our hearts. In the way we live our lives in their honor. He pulled a card from his pocket, not a show card, his personal business card, and pressed it into her hand. If your family ever needs anything, anything at all, you call that number. Promise me. Dorothy looked at the card, then at Steve, then at her family standing at the podium, tears running down all their faces. I promise, she said. But you've already given us everything we needed. You stopped. You listened. You made space for my husband's memory on this stage. That's a gift I'll carry forever. The camera captured it all. The jacket still draped over Dorothy's shoulders. The card in her hand. Steve's tears. The audience's tears. The Johnson family holding each other. And behind them, on the board, those answers still glowing, especially that last one. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. 3 months later, Steve Harvey told a reporter that Grandma Dorothy's jacket still hangs in his dressing room. Not as a trophy. As a reminder. Every time I walk past it, he said, I remember that my job isn't just to make people laugh. It's to make space for them to be human. To be seen. To be heard. Grandma Dorothy passed away 18 months after that taping, surrounded by her family, at peace. At her funeral, Marcus placed 2 things in her casket, her husband's wedding ring, and Steve Harvey's business card. Because some moments transcend television. Some connections transcend fame. And some lessons about love, loss, and the conversations we have with those who've gone before us. Those lessons last forever. That's what happens when someone is brave enough to say, I talk to him in my prayers. And someone else is brave enough to stop everything and listen.